everyone. It's Leanne West, and I'm president of the International Children's Advisory Network. I just want to welcome you today to Ask the Experts with Anthony Chang. So I just want to thank everybody for being here today for Ask the Experts. And we have a couple of special guests today, Nicole and Carter, and they're going to talk about writing a good advocacy letter for yourself and how to make it persuasive. So let's have them just introduce themselves really quickly. Nicole, do you want to start?
Sure. I'm Nicole. I am 21. Right now, I'm studying journalism in college, so I do a lot of writing. And I've been a rare disease advocate for most of my life. And a lot of the way I got into that was through writing. So I'm excited to speak with you all.
Great. Carter?
Hi everyone, I'm Carter. I'm currently a freelance writer. I've done a lot of writing for magazines, newspapers, blogs, and that's definitely how I got into the advocacy space. I'm calling in here from Seattle, and I'm 21 years old. I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome with a bunch of comorbidities with that.
Thanks. And so which one of y'all maybe wants to start about, what you even start with about writing a letter? Like, what do you think about first before you begin writing? Or do you just kind of dive in?
You can go. You can go. You had a lovely setup for how you wanted to dive in. So I'll let you go, Carter.
So I think writing for advocacy, there's a bunch of different ways to start. For me, I'll usually think of what's my goal in writing, and then what do I want the person who's reading this to know. It's a little bit different depending on whether I'm writing like for a newspaper or if it's something that I'm going to post online or something I'm going to send to someone working for the government. But usually I'll incorporate some of my story to show like why whatever I'm trying to say matters. So if I'm writing about a particular policy that I want someone to support, or something like that where I want them to support some kind of action, I'll talk about what it is, why it matters to the general community, and talk about how that directly impacts me in my life. Like I might bring up a story about how hard it was for me to get my diagnosis with my rare disease, and then how a particular policy might make it easier for other people to learn about their diagnosis sooner or raise more awareness for it. So I think figuring out why you want someone to take an action and then sharing why it would impact you. Those are the big things for me. Nicole?
I definitely agree with that. I think it's really important to know your goal and know your audience. So again, like Carter said, you'd write differently depending on who you're talking to. If you're talking to a friend, you'd speak differently than if you're talking to like an elected official or even like a teacher, an adult in your community. There's lots of different ways to approach that. But it's important to know what you want to come out of this, and then maybe give these people a little bit of background if they don't know you. So a little bit about yourself, why you care about this issue, what it is you want them to do about it, because it's important to have what we call a call to action. So you always want to end off with one action this person can take to help achieve whatever it is you're asking of them. Whether that's in YAR, often it's vote on legislation. YAR is the group that me and Carter are in. But it could be you want to help raise money for a cause, or you want to host an event to spread awareness about something. So always include something that this person can do to help you or your cause at the end. And that makes it more impactful because you're telling them who you are, why you care, and what they can do about it.
Okay, I think that's all really, really good advice. And I think one of the biggest things that y'all both said was talking a little bit about yourself. So making it personal about you. I think when you write to somebody and you're asking them to do something and you're explaining why it matters, knowing that you're one of those people that it matters to really, I think, enhances your communication. And I think that's true even when you speak, not just in writing. So I think that that's really good advice. Um, I don't know, do either of you have questions maybe for our speakers about writing? Maybe are there any resources out there to help somebody who wants to write a letter? Does YAR have anything like that, or maybe another organization online?
I know somewhere there's a template for like writing an ask when it comes to like policy issues. I know there's also some tips out there. I can look for those and drop a link when I find it.
Oh yeah, that would be wonderful because I think that would help people. I know that for me, when I'm writing, it's always really hard for me to start, but if I have something like a template that gives me an example, that usually really helps me a lot get started. And then, it's easy to kind of go from there once you start, or have an example of what an ask is. I think you mentioned, Carter, some of the things that you could ask for. Nicole, I think you did too. Um, maybe tell us a little bit about letters that you all have written and what kind of things you've asked for, because that might give um, our participants an idea of what kind of things can you ask for. Nicole, do you want to go first?
Sure. So I've contacted people kind of to ask and advocate for a few different things. How I got into advocacy first was my rare disease called Marfan syndrome. So a lot of what I asked for were like, hey, is it okay if I host an event at school or at this place to raise awareness about what this condition is? Or maybe to raise some money for the organization that like helps like contribute to research and stuff. So that's some things I've asked for. And for things like that, also, for example, February is Rare Disease Month, and a lot of rare diseases also have like a different like awareness month or timeline. And so for Marfan syndrome, it falls in February at the same time as Rare Disease month. So oftentimes what a lot of people will do is they will write to like the mayor of their town or the governor of their state or something and get like a proclamation for this to be the state to say, hey, this is like Rare Disease Awareness Month in our state as well, or Marfan Syndrome Awareness Month, things like that. And if you're doing something like that, there's a lot of templates online for that. So it kind of tells you like, here's how you should like address this person. Here's how you should phrase your ask. And then you just kind of give your background, why it matters to you. So I've done things like that. I've also done more formal things where I went and I met with my senator to ask her to support a bill that would give more research money to rare disease. So those are kind of a few different things I've written for, and even like just like sometimes I write like giving advice about being a college student with like a rare disease and a disability. And I think it's just really important to know why you want to connect with people. Because I think when you're passionate about what you're doing, it really shows in your writing.
Well, I have a question, if you don't mind. Have either of you ever received like, letters back that were not like the outcomes that you wanted? And, how did you kind of process through that, and maybe like, written a response to that? No, I feel like, if like a negative comment, or like, if you were asking for policy change and someone comes back and it's like, no, like we're not, putting that on the table this season, how did that affect your writing?
I think that it's disappointing when you get not the response you hoped for, but sometimes it kind of motivates you to work a bit harder. So oftentimes, when you write to a legislator, for example, oftentimes you'll get like a very like automated response that they send to everyone. and it'll be like, thank you for contacting us. Your voice matters. But then they might not actually reply to what you requested. So that can be a bit disappointing sometimes. Or they say like, thank you for letting me know. I realize this is important to you, but like maybe like we don't have the time or capacity or whatever for this. And well, that's disappointing. I think it's also a good opportunity to reflect back on how you approach this situation. Was there something you could have like changed in what you were writing to make it more persuasive or make it more clear? Sometimes, especially if you have a rare disease or like you're involved in advocacy things, you get really used to certain words, terminologies, and things that maybe you take for granted, people understanding. So sometimes you really have to break it down to like, if I was talking to someone who didn't know anything, who had no background about this, how would I explain it in the best way that's also not too long and complicated? So I think that would be my advice for if you get not the response you're hoping for, just like review your approach, try again, and maybe talk to other people who are also involved in advocacy and see if they have any advice or can help you out.
Thank you.
I would also add, like, definitely don't get discouraged if you get responses that seem automated or seem like they're not necessarily supporting, because it's something that definitely one person might not be the difference, but when you're joining with a whole community that you're already involved with, these people are hearing from multiple people, and gradually it can't make that change. And maybe if they don't take a step to change on the particular action that you first send in, they'll see your name and recognize you, or they might recognize your story later and remember you. So maybe the first time it's not going to lead to a really huge change, but don't get discouraged, keep at it, and keep working with your community, because in the long term it does make a big difference, and it does help teach these people and raise awareness.
Nicole, you mentioned Rare Disease Month, and it is February, which is literally just a few days away. And I know, so I also have rare diseases, and I have participated in activities where we get to go talk to legislators and other people in government about conditions for things like bills that could be helpful for people like us. And so it might be a good time for some of our people interested in writing to do it this month. Maybe create a letter and send it to your local legislator, just to get a little bit of practice in and to think about it, because they're getting a lot this month. And so it could just be another voice that maybe really helps, right? So how do you all go about, let's say I want to do that. How do you go about finding who you would write to in your local government? Carter or Nicole?
I'll let Carter take this one. I feel like I've been talking a lot.
So usually there's places online where you can put in your zip code, it's part of your address, and it'll just tell you like who your senators are and who your local representative is. And then from there you can find their email or their phone number, so you can call them or you can email them and send them a letter. And from there let them know what piece of policy you care about, why they should care about it, and how it impacts you.
I agree. And sometimes they even want to see your face. Sometimes, even if you don't have like a really specific ask, they just like meaning who they're representing and hearing your story. Because when you're talking about elected officials, like these people are supposed to be representing you. So they're supposed to care about what you care about and speak up for you in these big places. So definitely, I know it can be scary, but don't be shy, because the reason they have their job is because of you. So you get to ask for what you want.
Yes, 100%. I think a really good thing you mentioned is don't be scared. So these people are, one, they're there to represent you. So they need to know what they want they want to know what you want them to do, right? So they're there to listen to you. And they have people on their staff that read the letters and look at things so that they can know what their people in their community want you to do. And I think too that they're just regular people. So just because they have a government title and that might seem like kind of like they're really important and big, they're still just regular people and they care about people. So I think never be afraid to talk to them or ask them something. So aside from legislators and people in the government, maybe what kind of places, where else have you written? Is there any organizations that you've written to make an ask or anything like that?
I know my writing's been a little spread out in different places. There's tons of places you can get started. For me, I started with my school newspaper, writing just to share my story, so maybe other people going through similar things would feel less alone. And people who haven't been through those things would have better understanding. I've also written, like for a local newspaper, to write about a piece of policy that people should support. Also for some blogs, just sharing like what my story has been for accepting a new diagnosis or accepting new symptoms into my life. And in some cases, even putting together like a press release to spread some more information if any newspapers want to write about it. Sometimes it can look like posting on social media to share a story, sometimes reaching out to a blog or a patient organization if you're connected to any, or there's any that goes with the diagnosis or symptoms you have. But definitely anywhere that you're interested in, there are opportunities for writing. Even if you're a creative writer and you like writing poetry or short stories, there's a place for that in the community. So you don't necessarily have to consider yourself a writer or do like a certain kind of writing to use it for advocacy. You might already be using it already if you've reached out to teachers asking for what you need, or if you've reached out to parents asking for something that you need. There's so much room for writing and advocacy. For me, it's looked a lot like newspapers and blogs, but it really is all over the place. There's opportunities for everyone.
That's really good. I do want to ask you a question about what you just said. So how do you find, you mentioned writing about maybe there's a policy that you want to change or maybe requests that gets put into action. How do you become aware of these policies so that you know what to ask for? Like, how do you find that?
I think on a more general level, it can be if there's something with your school or in your community that you want to change because it's not working for you. Otherwise, through the YAR program, the Every Life Foundation has like a whole list of different advocacy issues. Also, Global Genes is another organization that deals with legislative policy. So either of their websites would have a lot of information in that area. Nicole, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I agree with what Carter said. They explained it very well. The Every Life Foundation is how I met Carter right before this. And oftentimes, if you don't know where to start, they have like descriptions of what's going on with policy. They have like an email newsletter that you can get like every month. You can sign up for like the young adult one if you want to be connected with like kind of people in your age group more specifically. But what was I going to say? I lost my train of thought there. Oh yes, they also have like they have scripts. So if you maybe you want to send a letter, or maybe you're not comfortable sending a letter and you want to make a phone call, maybe that's easier for you. Oftentimes they have scripts of like what to say. So like, hello, my name is, and then you fill it in. And they give you some words to describe like the background of what you're asking for. So scripts are a good place to start because it can get you comfortable with what you're doing. And then maybe later on you can learn through the process like how to tailor this to you specifically, or like make it sound more like your own voice.
Yeah, those are great suggestions. And I'll say through iCAN too, we would love to take, if you wanted to write a blog that we wanted to share on our website or share with people who are just interested in iCAN, we would absolutely love to have something that you write so we can share it. And we do have, we have our original program, which is for people aged roughly 8 to 18 or through high school. And then we also now have a young adult professional program for anyone interested in advocacy or the medical field in general, that's roughly 19 or college age and up, somewhere in the early career. So that's another good way to meet people as well. But I think those are great suggestions about, like, who have you written to? Well, let's ask me that, Nicole. I don't think you got to answer that. Who have you written to that you felt was like really important, or important for you to contact?
Kind of similar to Carter, I've written to my senator. I've sent a lot of emails to people at my college when there have been some things that are inaccessible and I would like them to change. So I've done a lot of that. I wrote a blog for iCAN one time, so that was fun.
Yeah.
One time, last summer, I wrote for a website called Best Colleges, and I got to explain my experience being like the first one in my family to go to college, and how that kind of interacts with me having like a rare disease, and like in my case, I also consider a disability because of how it impacts me. So that was like more of a advice piece that I wrote for others like in a similar situation. So that's something I really enjoyed. Yeah.
Very cool. So I just want to mention that Carter and Abby have both been putting things into the chat, links that you might want to follow to either organizations or prompts on how to get started with writing, to give you some ideas of what to write. So if you want, I would, copy those, but they'll also be in the recording that we share. We always share the chat as well, so they'll be there too. And maybe what we can do at iCAN is start a page where we put some of this information, Abby. I think that would be really, really good for people. So do any of our guests today, anyone who's joining us, do you all have any questions for our speakers? Some things you've thought about while they've been talking? I do know I had one other question. You talked about maybe even sharing something with your local newspaper. How do you go about finding who to contact at your local newspaper? Who would you reach out to?
I know for me, one way that's easy to find a local newspaper is to search your city and then the word news. And so the first things that come up might be a newspaper or an online publication directly for your city or for the cities near it. And if you go on their page in the contact section, then there's usually an editor or some kind of general email that you can reach out to and tell them you have a story and you want to share it.
Okay.
Either as a writer or someone to be interviewed.
Yeah, I didn't even really think about that. So I usually have done things in person and speaking. I've never really tried to write about something before. So I think that's a great way to start. That they, if you reach out to them or you go to their website, they have a place where you can submit that you want to write something. That's great. What else about writing and making your story persuasive? Do you have any other advice?
I would say, honestly, just practice makes perfect, and it's easy to feel self-conscious about what you're writing because you're sharing like a piece of yourself. And a lot of people who write feel that way. I've been writing a long time and I still feel that way sometimes, but it gets easier as you go. and no one is perfect at it. So as much as we want to be perfect, I know I'm guilty of that. Sometimes if you spend a really long time trying to make it perfect, you don't get it done. And it's more impactful if you get it done than if it's perfect someday down the line. So I know that's something I'm still working on to remember.
I think that's true for a lot of things. Don't let perfect get in the way of good enough, right? Like, do it and it's going to be great. And I don't even think that the legislators or the newspaper, I don't even think they look for perfect necessarily, right? Like, they want your story and they want it to sound like it's coming from you and the way you talk. And that may not be 100%, perfect, whatever that looks like. I don't even know what perfect looks like, right? So I think that that's definitely good advice. Carter, do you have anything else?
I'd absolutely agree with that. The best piece of writing is one that's been done. If you don't finish it or you don't write it, then no one's hearing that story. So it's definitely important to give it your best. And yeah, I definitely just want to agree with that. I can also add a couple links to places that accept writing, especially from young adults, if that helps.
Yeah, that would be great.
Be super great. I had a question that kind of follows up with that. Do you guys ever experience like writer's block, and like how do you like work through that? Because I know I like that's something I've experienced that like a lot of other people have experienced too.
All the time. What's really made a difference for me is instead of like kind of going back to what I said earlier, instead of sitting myself down and being like, okay, you have to write this really good thing right now. If I'm thinking about it, if I even have like one sentence or a few words that I know I want to include or some ideas, I'll write them down. There's a lot of brainstorming that goes into it. And sometimes like I feel like I need to wait until I know exactly what I want to say to start writing. But you don't have to. It's you're the only one saying this until you're done. So if you're trying to say something, you don't know how to explain it, it doesn't make sense, just keep writing down whatever comes to your mind, and then you have something to start with. Then later on, maybe when you're in a better space mentally, you can go over what you wrote and you can make it into something better. But you can't like make it into something better if you don't have anything to start with. So even if you don't think what you are producing at that moment is good, you can work with bad. You can't work with nothing.
I love that. Thank you.
How do you choose like which, I know it's kind of a weird question, but which pieces of your rare disease story to share, I guess, because I feel like living with a rare disease, there's so many things that happen to you, like many hospitalizations, many treatments, like which ones, how do you defer, like which ones are most impactful, I guess?
I think, at least for me, deciding which would be most impactful, it depends on the specific goal I have with that piece of writing and what kind of action that I want taken out of it. Like this story, I might tell, if I'm talking about like a issue in awareness, would be more about how it took me a long time to find a diagnosis. But that would be a totally different story if I want the action to be about changing something different, like an insurance policy, where I might talk about like the cost of a treatment and how that was an issue for me to access it. So I think we definitely all have a lot of different stories. You don't have to get tied down to just telling one story. You have, like, depending on what the issue is and what action you want taken, you can choose which one connects a little bit more to that action.
Definitely everything that Carter said. And also remember when you're incorporating your story, it's to help with background and kind of this personal element, but you don't have to share anything you're not comfortable with. Like you could even just say like, my name's Nicole and I have Marfan syndrome. And then you can provide some facts from somewhere else. Like I would go to the Marfan Foundation to talk about Marfan syndrome. So again, you might share a little bit of your life. You might say, oh, sometimes I have to go to a hospital and I miss school. So because of that, I would like there to be like lessons online that I can use or something like that. You don't have to give a bunch of personal details if you're not comfortable with that. And I'd also always recommend talking to like, depending on how old you are, talking to a parent, talking to a friend, talking to someone you trust. This kind of goes along with the question I saw in the chat. Do you recommend your story to be read by someone else before sending it to a legislator or an organization? Yes. I think you should always have someone else read your work if that's something you're comfortable with. And I know for me, I feel really weird when someone else is reading my work. I feel like they might judge me, or what if what I wrote was bad and they tell me it's bad? But that's why it should be someone you trust, someone that wants this to be the best it can be. And so it's good sometimes when we're writing and we're in our head, we have things we thought that we didn't necessarily write or that we understand like as a given or as a fact that the people we're writing to might not have that knowledge or background. So when you give it to someone else to read, then they can say, hey, you know, what did you mean by this? Or can you explain this better so this person can understand? Personally, I worked as an editor on my college newspaper, and that really helped me with my writing because I realized, you know, anyone can write the most incredible thing, but there may always be some way we need to adjust it a little bit for our audience or to make it like the best it can be. So just because someone like recommends changes doesn't mean what you did was bad. It just means they're trying to help you make it better. So yes, I do think you should have someone else read your work if possible.
Great questions, you all. Do you have any others? And you can put them in the chat. Oh, go ahead.
So this is gonna be my first time going to Rare Disease Week on Capitol Hill this year. And so like for the Hill meetings with your senators, do you have any advice, I guess, about like, for me, I'm more used to, you know, sharing my story through writing. I haven't really like said aloud yet. And how is that different? How can you translate those like writing skills into speaking, I guess?
Congratulations on going for your first year. That's so exciting. I actually had my first in-person meeting earlier this year. And for that, I definitely was a little bit nervous, and it's okay to be nervous. And just practice at home for what you're going to say would be one of my big pieces of advice. If you have a script or something that you've written and you know what you want to say, you can practice saying it how you would speak it to them, like practicing in the mirror or practicing for a friend or a family member. And also it can help to print out some information about whatever you plan on talking about, just so that you have something in front of you and something that you can hand to the person you're talking to so that they can keep it and see it afterward. But just going, you're making a personal connection with your senator or your representative, and that does make a big impact.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with having, it's okay to have notes. Even these people you're meeting with have notes because they can't remember everything they're supposed to be talking about or saying. And definitely agree with the practice. I know sometimes when you're writing, you can put a lot of emphasis on like how exactly you're going to word a sentence. When you're speaking to someone, there might not be the room to memorize it all. And sometimes if you try to memorize what you want to say word for word, it can end up sounding like a little bit like more like a robot than like you as a person. So I just recommend having like a list of like key points you want to get to, and maybe like some specific examples. So like you could write down like example, a story of when I went to the hospital this time or something, just to like jog your memory. So have more of like what you want to cover and maybe like how you want to tell it. Do you want to tell this like chronologically? Do you want to say like, this is what it was like with my rare disease when I was young. This is what it's like now. Or do you want to do it in a different way? Sometimes you can like start with a specific example, like start small and then go big. There's lots of different ways to do it. But when it comes to translating your writing to speaking, it's I feel more about making that connection with the person and less about getting the exact wording right, if that makes sense. And yeah, just practice with a friend or a family member, someone you feel comfortable with. And even if it doesn't go the way you perhaps exactly wanted or expected, it's also very normal and encouraged to send a follow-up email being like, hey, it was so great to meet you. Thank you for discussing this and this with me. If you want more information, you can go to this website or you can email me. So also you can have something written ready to follow up with in case you forget to say something or you just want to remind them what you talked about.
Yeah, so I'll say for me, when I talk in front of people, I definitely make a list of all the things that I want to make sure that I mention so I don't forget something, because that's a big problem of mine is I'll forget what I wanted to say or I'll leave something out. But like you said, you can always follow up with them afterwards with an email. And I think that that's a really great piece of advice, because the more they hear it from you and see it, the more it's going to stick in their head, right? They might see 30 people on Capitol Hill and hear a whole lot of stories. But if you also follow up, then they have it right in front of them and it helps them remember you. I think that's a super great piece of advice. I do see another question in the chat. Is there an ideal length for your story to be? I think so. Nicole, Carter, what do y'all think?
No. I know if I'm speaking, like at a meeting like this, it's usually 1 to 2 minutes. In an article, it might, that you're writing out, it might be like 500 words or just a couple paragraphs of talking about who you are, what your story is, and why it should matter to the person reading. I think there are definitely some spaces here and there where you can go really long or really short. That's generally what I aim for. Nicole?
Yeah, sorry, I'm losing my voice a little bit. I've been a little bit sick, but so if you're asking specifically about the meeting with your legislators for Rare Disease Week, definitely talk to you're probably gonna be going in a group if there's other people from the same state or area as you. So it might depend how many people are in your group, how much time you get to talk individually. But definitely reach out to the coordinator of like who's contacting you about these events, and they can give you a better idea of like how long will we have with this person total, and then depending if there's other people in your group or not, you can figure out if you can go longer or shorter. I will say oftentimes we speak a lot faster than we think we do when we are nervous or like presenting something. So if you know about what you want to say, if you have it written down or just like your main points to hit, practice it, time yourself. And as long as you stay like about 1 to 2 minutes, like in the range of what your given time is, you'll be fine. Don't worry too much about that. I know it's easier said than done. But yeah, and just again, depending on the situation, you might want more background personally about your story, or you might want more like hard facts that you can give them about like your disease or like what this situation or policy is. So just kind of see like how much of that background do you need? Do you need to tell them like your whole diagnostic process and symptoms you have and like everything throughout your life, or do you just need to tell them enough so that they understand what you're going to ask of them? I guess would be my advice.
And I'll add to that. I spoke to people during Rare Disease Week a couple of years ago. And in one of the sessions, there was like 8 of us. So we literally did have like 1.5 minutes to talk and make your point. But then I went in another one and there was nobody there but me. So I had all 10 minutes with this person. And so what I was going to say is, have the points that you want to make that you could do quickly in your 1 to 2 minute talk, but then maybe have some extra things you could talk about if you end up being the only person there, or one of 2 people as opposed to one of 6 or 8 people. So just so you can make the most of the time, hit extra points or tell extra stories. Carter just shared something in the chat. Oh yeah, good. It's a webinar on how you can share your story and on rare disease, and it's coming up in Rare Disease Week. So which week is Rare Disease Week?
I believe it's February 27th or 28th through March 2nd.
I believe it is the last week.
Yeah. I know Rare
End of
Disease.
February.
Yeah, the Rare Disease Day is February 28th. So yeah, probably during that week. And Nell already dropped, but we were so happy to have her.
Yeah, there was some really great questions there. And I just wanted to add, if anyone has any questions they think of afterwards, feel free to reach out to Abby, and Abby can pass them along to me. I'm always happy to hear from anyone and just talk about all this cool stuff. I'm really excited you guys wanted to hear what we had to say.
Yeah, feel free to pass them along to me for sure. I know it's kind of hard to think of questions on the spot sometimes. I always think of my best questions, when it feels like it's too late, but it's not. So do feel free to, email me. I'll pass those along.
And I'll say too, again, we are always happy to share things at iCAN. And so if you wanted to share your story or thoughts about rare disease or anything, we're happy to share those with everybody and put them on the website. And, maybe knowing it's pretty easy to submit something to Abby and get it out there. Maybe that'll help you feel more comfortable if you do it with somebody else afterwards. So definitely always feel free to share.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that goes for everybody. We're always happy to help spread the word about, everyone and their own stories.
Yeah. And so we have like 13 minutes left. Does anyone have any other questions or other thoughts that you want to share? Okay.
You can also add that a lot of these people and places that you would be reaching out to, or maybe you already have, their whole job is to help you and to help spread awareness about these things. So if you're not sure, you're never doing too much. Like your teacher, their job is to help you learn, or your government, their job is to help all the people in the community. These organizations are built to help you grow and to help the wider community with your diagnosis or whatever it is that you're talking about. So you're never being too much, and there's always space for your story there.
Yes. And there's space for your story more than once, right? Like you can share it with a lot of different people and places, and that way you can reach the most people. Nicole?
That's very true. Carter said it perfectly. I would also add, if you're contacting, like, say, a local newspaper or someone at your school to just talk about things with your school or something like that, oftentimes, like, say, with newspapers, their whole job is to come up with stories, and sometimes they have no idea what to do. So you could really be helping them by reaching out. They'd be like, oh, finally, we have something cool to share, something different that we haven't done before. This is going to be so great. So again, these people should be excited to hear from you.
Yeah, and I'll add to that stories that come from youth, kids, young people, they're really impactful. Like, you can share a good story and people are going to listen to you. I know when I go to conferences and we have people speak, I mean, I could speak or some adult can speak and everybody's looking on their cell phones and kind of half paying attention. But when a young person gets up on stage and starts telling their story, everybody stops, puts down the phone, and focuses on you and listens. It's amazing. And so never be afraid to share because they are going to listen. And the other thing I want to say is that, you're writing about yourself and your experiences and the way you feel. And you can't be wrong with that. So don't be scared to say something. No one's going to think you're stupid or anything. It's your story. You're always going to be right when you say it. So definitely don't be afraid to reach out and do something.
And
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, just like a last little minute question for Nicole and Carter. By writing advocacy letters, do you feel like you're really like making an impact in the community? And how does that like encourage you to keep writing?
That's good.
For anyone up in the air.
Yeah, I think it really does make an impact, especially with things like Rare Disease Week, where you're often with a group of people from your area. But even if it's just you, like, that's a person that you're connecting with and who's hearing your story, whether it's for the first time or if you've met them before. And it really adds, like, that human element to whatever you're talking about. Anyone can send in, hey, you should do this thing or feel this way. But when you bring your story, like, that's a person that they're hearing from. That's a person who has a real life and a real family and a real experience. And it does make an impact, and sometimes in surprising ways. Like, I had a meeting with someone in person earlier this year and ended up learning that they have a similar diagnosis and making that personal connection. So now we've been in touch to talk more about policy issues. And there are times when you learn that someone that you're meeting with has actually heard about your diagnosis or knows someone with it, and you can make a really cool connection out there when you reach out and you share a letter or you have a meeting. It really does make a difference. Sometimes if you write something online, someone will reach out and say, hey, this mattered to me, or like, I really related to this. So you really are making a difference with anything you do.
For sure. Everything Carter said is perfect. And also remember, there's a lot of different ways to advocate. It could even be just like emailing. Like this week, I had to email someone at my school because I use a wheelchair at school, and now that it was snowing, some parts of the school were inaccessible, so it was hard for me to get to class. And like me speaking up for what I needed is also advocating, and it could also have helped someone else who may have been nervous to email or wasn't sure. And I did see a really great question in the chat.
Yep.
Is it okay to advocate for a friend instead? How would you approach that differently to make sure their voice is heard? I think it's wonderful to advocate for a friend and maybe a community you're a part of. I think when you're doing that, I think it's most important to ask this person or group of people what they feel is the most important that you address, and if there's a specific way they'd like you to frame it. Like, for example, with me, sometimes when other people are speaking about me or something I live with, I don't really like it when they like make it like, oh, like Nicole's so inspirational because she goes to college even though like she's sick. Like, I don't like that. And so if someone were advocating for like my rare disease and they ask me, hey, like, what do you want me to share? I might give them like maybe like a list of like some of the things that are hardest for me, or some of the things that if there was like a change or more resources, that I personally would find most helpful, because sometimes what we think is best for people or they might want isn't the same thing as what they're thinking. So I think it would be important to talk to that person or group of people. And then I think it's really commendable when you're trying to use your voice to also support that cause. So that's great. Keep doing that. I'm so sorry, my cat just jumped on the table. But yeah, just kind of ask for their opinion, what they think the most important facts are. And maybe you can also like make a draft. And once you've done your draft, maybe you can have them look it over and see if there's anything you didn't include that they want you to include. I don't know if Carter has any more advice on that.
I definitely agree. It's awesome to advocate with friends and for friends and for other people that you're close to. Definitely talk with them and find out what's important for them. If they need something, there's a good chance that there's other people in your community who need the same thing. And especially trying to read a couple stories or watch and hear from other people and see what they need. But yeah, definitely great to advocate for friends and with friends.
Yeah, I think we all appreciate someone, standing up for us and helping in situations where, maybe we can't share our voice for whatever reason. And so to have somebody help you and just know that they're there for you is really great. I mean, that's a great friend. It's a great family member. So I know I always appreciate that. All right. So we're kind of coming up on the end of the hour. So I don't know if anyone has any final comment they want to say, but we really appreciate you all being up bright and early on a Saturday morning, unless you're in Europe and then it's an afternoon. And we appreciate that too. I think one of the things that I want to do, Abby, is put this into our Telling Your Story curriculum module as another resource, because I think it was really good advice about how to tell your story, whether it was speaking or writing. And so we so appreciate y'all's time today. Again, I'll encourage anyone to join iCAN, whether it's our age 8 to 18 group or the young adult professional group. And a lot of the young adult professional group, it really is all about for people who either still want to share their stories about living with a condition or a device or a medication, whatever it might be. But it's also for people who are just interested in careers in healthcare, and that might be advocacy or building medical devices or becoming a doctor. But there's all sorts of things that you can go into. And just having that connection and drive and empathy, all the different things that you need to tell a really good story to make a difference in somebody's life. And maybe it's yours, maybe it's the kid who comes after you, maybe it's one of your good friends. I think that's also very important. So those are my last words. Nicole or Carter or anyone else have any comment they want to make?
Definitely when you're advocating with other people or for other people, the things that impact you, they also impact the people around you. They impact your friends and your family and your community. If you're advocating for a friend, it's something that's also impacting you. So you're not alone in this. And then writing does not have to look any sort of way. It doesn't have to be sitting with a paper and pencil for hours or at a keyboard for hours. I've done a lot with like speech to text because I've been having some hand surgeries, and I've done other writing in really short bursts of just notes on my phone that I use later. So writing does not have to look any certain way. It's whatever works for you, whatever works on your timeline.
Great advice.
That's really great advice. I don't really think I have anything to share that we haven't covered, but again, I just wanted to say thank you for having us. It was really great to get to connect with other people who are also interested in this. And thank you for all the great resources iCAN has.
Well, thank you. We do it all for y'all.
Very much.
Yeah, we so appreciate your time today. I mean, this was really wonderful. And I know I would not have been able to come up with all of the good advice that you all gave. So we appreciate all of your input today and good questions also. So great. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a good Saturday. Have a good weekend.
Enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.